which Bible translation is more accurate, or which Bible translation is the best. And today we're going to discuss how we can figure that out. First of all, the Bible was written in 3 languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Now, to get from those original languages to English, that requires translation. And in the United States, we have a plethora of translations available. It can seem overwhelming with the amount of Bible translations that are out there, but we're going to simplify it and hopefully make it easier for you to decide. So some basic statistics out there. The majority of people tend to buy about 5 to 10 different translations. These make up the bulk of most Bibles that are sold, and those are the translations that tend to be most popular. So if this is your first time buying a Bible, I would suggest to probably pick one of the top 10 translations that are on the list to give you a good head start. Now, when it comes to translations, there are 2 primary methods of use when it comes to translating a word or a phrase. It can be more easily recognized as a word for word or thought for thought translation. Most of the time when you see the Bibles lined up on like a scale or a line, you can see on one side it's word for word and the other side is thought for thought, and most of the translations kind of hover in the middle. But I would suggest to make this kind of scale a little bit more complicated. It's not really on this linear line where one side is word for word and the other side is thought for thought. In fact, I would change it to a 2-axis kind of graphic. So on the x-axis, you would have word for word, and on the y-axis you have thought for thought. And most Bible translations do use a mix and a blend of both of those to create their final translation. This is primarily just how translation is in the real natural world. And languages are not perfectly mapped to one another. There are some things that may have a wide range of meaning in English, but only one word in Greek, or vice versa. And the job of the translators is to help bridge that gap. If you study any additional languages, you may encounter this fact where sometimes a word may have multiple meanings and it doesn't necessarily translate to the target language that you're thinking of. For example, in Cantonese, there is a word called sikfan, and that means to literally eat rice. You can apply this word or phrase in many different ways. So the most traditional way is the phrase sikfanma, and it literally translates to eat rice ? But usually this phrase is referring to, are you hungry? Do you want to eat? And so it's not a direct translation. So if you were to take it literally, then it just means eat rice, or do you want to eat rice? It doesn't have the full range of meaning that that phrase can offer. Now, someone says the phrase "sikmefana." Now, in a specific context, that doesn't refer to eating a meal at all. In fact, it actually means, what are you pondering? What are you thinking? What thoughts are you chewing on or thinking over? So it has a more allegorical meaning aside from the literal meaning to eat rice. So translators have to figure out, what is the context? What's going on in a passage? Does it literally mean eat rice, or does it figuratively mean, pondering or thinking on a thought? And that's kind of what goes on in the mind of translators when they're trying to figure out, does something mean very literally this term or phrase, or is it something more figurative or allegorical where the English language may not have the exact meaning or understanding, and so you have to bring it into English with a related concept. So that's kind of the basic bridge of navigating translations. Each American English translation has their own way of translating those types of things. Now, most English translations use a blend of this word for word or thought for thought, this literal and figurative blend of translations to get the best and most accurate presentation of what the Bible is trying to say. When you go more towards a word for word translation, that can be like an interlinear or a NASB type of translation. They tend to use a lot more literal meanings of things, and it may not make as much sense, but if you understand some of the figures of speech or those types of concepts, then you may see how that particular translation treats those phrases. On the other side, you can have a Bible like the NLT or the NIV that uses a little bit less of the literal word for word translations and kind of gives you the meaning and the thought that's trying to be expressed in the Bible. And so sometimes these tend to be a little bit more readable and more understandable. So in the NIV and NLT, they kind of use more of the modern day equivalent of those ancient sayings and put it into modern day contexts and in a more relevant language so we can better understand what the Bible is saying. Both types of Bibles, and I would say like the majority of popular translations, try to bridge this gap and balance out between word for word and thought for thought. No Bible is perfect in its translation, and I think that's why I would personally suggest having one main Bible as the Bible you read through, you churn through, you study through, and that you know fairly well. And when you encounter more controversial or ambiguous passages that may be a little bit more confusing, you can refer to other translations for probably some clarification or to just kind of reaffirm what you already understand or know. The main point of Bible translations is to get you reading into the Bible. Just read the actual words on the page is way more important than figuring out which specific translation is better or which translation is more accurate, because all of them try to be as accurate as possible within their own context and philosophy. It's better to start with one, be familiar with it, and then move on to another one, and then you can compare. And as you continue to do that with multiple different translations, you'll figure out and understand things in a more fully nuanced way. And that way you have something to compare it to, and that way you know how to kind of fit the pieces together so that they are more beneficial to you and that you can overall learn more about the Bible. Because the truth is that if you don't read the Bible, you won't know what it's about. And so it doesn't really matter what translation you pick per se, but rather that you actually dive into the word, study it, and pull out the principles that are written in the Bible so that you can apply it to your life, and that way it will be much better. Now, if you want to learn more about Bible translations and how different translations kind of put together and kind of you want to kind of dive deeper into that kind of aspect, then this book would be great. It's called One Bible, Many Versions by Dave Brunn. This book really clarified how to understand translations for me. It really showcases how all modern day Bible translations use a mix of word for word and thought for thought translations to really pull together and bring the Word of God alive, and how, what one translation may call itself very literal can still use very thought for thought practices in its translation. And if you want to know more about kind of the nuances in Bible translation, I highly recommend you read this book, and it gives you a clearer picture than what I can say. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer as best as I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!